investigators began to suspect that Lori played a far more sinister role in her husband's sudden, suspicious demise. "I have no idea what you're implying," Lori replied, shielding herself behind a mask of bewildered and tragic innocence. 30 days prior, she lured Larry to a remote Idaho lake, sending him plunging 60 meters into the dark depths. Lori was convinced her theatrical performance of grief would successfully blind the authorities to her cold-blooded actions. "I reached for him," she insisted, describing the exact moment his body allegedly began its final descent into the water. She remained unaware that the narrative had shifted. She was no longer a survivor, but a primary homicide suspect. Larry's autopsy changed everything, revealing that his system was saturated with a massive, lethal dosage of toxic substances. Forensic evidence would soon prove that detectives had been interviewing a calculated killer from the very start of the case. The investigation boiled down to one question: did she witness an accident, or was she a killer? On the freezing morning of February 13, 2018, rural Idaho dispatchers received a frantic call from Lori Eisenberg. 911, what is your location? Please help me. I am lost somewhere out on the frozen lake right now. The operators struggled to hear her through the panic as she claimed to be adrift without any coordinates. She reported that her husband had vanished overboard after a sudden medical episode, claiming she searched for hours. Law enforcement and recovery teams were immediately mobilized, racing toward the chilling and expansive waters of Lake Coeur. While divers scanned the depths, detectives began a preliminary interview with Lori to reconstruct the timeline of the alleged accident. "Hello, Lori. I'm Deputy Baum from the Sheriff's Department, and I am here to help you through this." He explained his intention to gather basic facts to help the search teams narrow down their focus on the lake. He paused, then asked, "Can you explain how you sustained those visible injuries and the blood on your nose?" She claimed she fell against a boat door in a failed attempt to catch Larry as he went overboard. The officer assured her that the region's most skilled rescue professionals were currently scouring the lake to find her husband. He pressed for more detail, asking her to estimate the exact location where Larry initially disappeared beneath the surface. She gestured vaguely toward the shoreline, prompting the deputy to ask if any landmarks or trees caught her eye. She nodded. He spoke gently, asking if she could estimate the distance from the boat to the nearest point of land. "From where, exactly?" she asked, appearing confused by his question regarding the location where the fireboat intercepted her. As she struggled with the distance, she continued to paint a picture of a husband who was physically failing. She suggested a sudden health crisis caused him to lose balance, though her story felt increasingly like a performance. She claimed Larry acted erratically, attempting to fix a functional motor while ignoring the one that had actually failed. She recalled questioning his confusing behavior during those final moments. "He turned toward me," she said, and his expression looked completely vacant, almost as if he were dead. She described a horrific facial distortion before he fell, claiming she slipped and failed to grab him in time. "I see." He reassured her that expert divers and specialized rescue teams were doing everything possible to locate her missing husband. He encouraged her to speak up if any specific memories or landmarks came to mind during her medical evaluation. He urged her to focus on any visual details that might help the dive teams pinpoint Larry's final location. Lori seemed visibly devastated at the scene. While the scene initially looked like a medical mishap, investigators noticed subtle, troubling inconsistencies within the widow's official story. Specifically, the significant delay in reporting the incident stood out, an omission she blamed on a failed search for a telephone. She maintained that she tried to reach the shore, but was thwarted by a mechanical failure that left her stranded. Nearby, the lead investigator pulled a trainee aside to offer a grim piece of professional advice about human behavior. He explained that the line between victim and perpetrator is thin, and a mask can hide dark secrets. He pointed out her injuries, noting her claim that she was hurt during a frantic and unsuccessful rescue attempt. She played the part perfectly. "In this profession," he warned, "never ignore your gut feeling when things seem suspicious, even when the suspect is crying." During the interview, officials offered standard reassurances, insisting their most capable personnel were actively handling the case. Lori was transported to a nearby medical facility to receive treatment for her facial trauma. Detectives staged an interview at the hospital, but her testimony only served to deepen the investigation's complexities. The interrogator pressed her to focus on the specific moment the medical emergency allegedly began to unfold. Her memory of the timeline was fractured, though she recalled him mentioning a nearby resort as he stirred. She claimed he expressed an interest in visiting that particular resort to find something for breakfast. According to her account, she attempted to rouse him fully to begin their morning plans. They shared a brief conversation, though she maintained that she had completely lost track of the time. He rose suddenly and appeared to put his weight on the ignition key, snapping the metal in two. The abruptness of his movement struck her as bizarre, leaving her to watch him in silent confusion. Their intentions were not recreational. The fishing gear remained untouched during this unsettling sequence of events. The detective revisited the detail about the broken key, questioning how such damage could have actually occurred. She hesitated, her composure momentarily slipping as she struggled to provide a definitive answer. Her response remained non-committal and vague. While she didn't witness the impact directly, she inferred his physical weight was responsible for the mechanical failure. It was only later, when she attempted to engage the engine, that she discovered the key was mangled. The hardware was severely distorted, a physical anomaly that demanded a more thorough explanation. She quickly corrected her previous statement. She suggested the malfunction occurred earlier, involving loose bolts and a starter that refused to turn over. This particular discrepancy immediately caught the attention of the seasoned investigators on the scene. The ignition key had been subjected to extreme force, twisted in a way that defied typical accidental damage. Authorities theorized that the distortion was the result of a violent struggle or a heavy, intentional impact. He reportedly mentioned that the engine was failing to respond correctly just before the incident. He moved toward the stern to inspect the machinery, closing the hatch behind him as he worked. He secured the compartment. When he transitioned to the electric motor, she questioned his erratic behavior and unclear objectives. She reminded him that they had no intention of utilizing that specific piece of equipment. From her position in the passenger seat, she observed his increasingly frantic interactions with the boat. He continued to manipulate the controls before turning to fix her with a strange, unreadable stare. He had been hunched over the engine before, suddenly snapping into an upright position. His sudden movement was punctuated by a facial expression she described as being entirely hollow and vacant. He pivoted away from her, his focus shifting toward the edge of the vessel. She believed he was reaching for the window frame, though his true intentions remained shrouded in mystery. She surged from her seat just as he sealed the protective enclosure between them. As he began to topple over the side, she scrambled forward in a desperate attempt to intervene. She claimed she lost her footing while reaching for his falling body right before he hit the water. He never resurfaced. The boat continued its path while she panicked, unable to locate him in the wake. She attempted to navigate the deck, but the plastic enclosures and zippers hindered her movements. She stumbled during her frantic search, struggling to gain a clear view of the dark water behind. Despite her efforts, there was no sign of him in the churning depths of the lake. She surveyed her surroundings. She pivoted to the port side, scanning the surface for any trace of her husband. The detective clarified that the primary gasoline engine was still idling when the victim went overboard. The vessel was essentially drifting in neutral while the tragedy unfolded on the deck. They were not moving at high speed, but the motor continued its low hum throughout the entire ordeal. She maintained that the vessel was traveling at a very low speed. In a heartbeat, he had simply vanished from the deck. Panic surged as she scanned the water, her screams echoing across the lake. Yet the dark surface remained unbroken, and her husband was gone. She claimed she waited with a life jacket ready, expecting him to resurface, but the depths offered no sign of life. Pacing the boat in a desperate loop, she shouted his name into the void, met only by the silence of the open water. Eventually, she engaged the engine, circling the area in a futile attempt to locate him. While shock can trigger erratic behavior, certain actions go beyond trauma, crossing into the territory of the deeply suspicious. Lori claims she spent 90 minutes navigating the waves alone before finally seeking outside assistance for her missing spouse. She continued her search, relying solely on the craft's secondary motor. Navigating toward any sign of life, she delayed reporting the incident for several hours after her husband allegedly went overboard. Claiming she finally found his phone on board, she contacted help, though her narrative soon began to fracture. Under questioning, her account shifted, providing investigators with 3 conflicting locations for the recovered device. While detectives focused on the disappearance, Lori was suddenly taken into custody for an entirely unrelated, yet significant, legal violation. This revelation cast deeper doubt on her story. She cited mounting family health care costs as her motive, insisting she fully intended to return the misappropriated funds. She denied personal gain, framing her actions as a desperate attempt to provide for her children's needs. When pressed on the total amount, she remained vague, hesitating to provide a definitive figure. She estimated the theft at $200,000, once again pledging to make full restitution. Her professional role was serving as the head of the North Idaho Housing Coalition, a local charitable entity. Within 4 years, she had quietly siphoned $500,000 from the organization's coffers. Facing charges of grand theft and 40 counts of forgery, her legal peril was extreme, yet the specter of homicide still loomed. Securing a homicide conviction proved difficult without a body or direct physical proof to substantiate their theories. The icy depths of the lake posed a significant barrier to the ongoing search. Authorities feared his remains were lost forever, as frigid waters are notorious for concealing their secrets. Freezing temperatures stall the natural processes of decomposition, often leaving the departed resting on the floor for decades. A breakthrough occurred when a local resident reported a grim discovery washed up on the banks near their home. By March 1st, responding officers confirmed the remains belonged to the 68-year-old patriarch, Lori Eisenberg. Post-mortem results provided damning evidence, leading to a high-stakes interrogation while she awaited trial for her financial crimes. They greeted Lori with a deceptive, professional warmth. One officer reminded her of their previous encounter during the initial search at her residence. Acknowledged, the detective probed for a reaction. They expressed feigned surprise regarding her imminent transfer to the federal facility in Dublin. Lori noted the strange passage of time behind bars, unaware the detectives were steering the conversation toward the past. They noted that their extensive investigation was finally nearing its conclusion. The team intended to conduct a final, thorough interview to tie up any remaining loose ends. They offered her a final chance to provide her own perspective on the newly uncovered evidence. Participation was presented as her choice, a classic tactical move to encourage cooperation. She cooperated. Although she was already serving time, the focus of the discussion shifted away from her fraud convictions. With her financial case finalized, she faced a definitive 5-year sentence for the embezzlement. The question of early release for good behavior within the federal prison system arose. Good behavior could reduce the sentence to 3 years total. While incarcerated, she now faced the chilling reality of a new investigation into a potential homicide. He began by recalling her previous session with Special Agent Gunnison. The investigator questioned whether her legal protections had been fully disclosed. There were 5 critical areas of the case requiring immediate clarification. Following the formal warning, the detective focused on the official narrative. A heavy silence preceded the next line of intense questioning. The couple reportedly planned a sunrise excursion to mend their bond. Their supposed destination was the distant Coeur Lake Resort docks. She claimed to have drifted into sleep shortly after departure. Upon waking, she noted her husband's mechanical struggles and strange demeanor. The situation allegedly deteriorated rapidly from that specific point forward. He reportedly collapsed overboard while attempting to repair the boat motor. The detective sought confirmation on this specific timeline of events. He pushed for a definitive account of the morning's tragedy. She maintained her total ignorance regarding the nature of his distress. The core claim remained a sudden, unexplained fall into the depths. She described a desperate search before eventually locating her mobile phone. Investigators flagged inconsistencies regarding where she actually discovered the device. Detective Jackson, a specialized diver, scrutinized her shifting narrative closely. One version of her story placed the phone inside a blanket. She had reportedly told medical staff a completely different version. Other statements placed the phone in a pocket or the dashboard. Despite the contradictions, she insisted every account was perfectly accurate. The detective scrutinized the evidence while noting these glaring discrepancies. Publicly filed affidavits in Spokane had already heightened the legal stakes. Uncertainty lingered regarding how much the press had already exposed. She acknowledged the version presented in the local news reports. Facts needed solidifying before the case reached the prosecutor's desk. Evidence suggested significant issues within the couple's private domestic life. The focus then shifted to the victim's final moments alive. Rumors of homicide were already beginning to cloud the investigation. The central mystery remained. Was it a tragic accident or murder? In the eyes of the law, only forensic facts mattered. Public perception of police work often differs from the harsh reality. Investigators serve as collectors of truth, not architects of fate. He asked if her memory of the incident had shifted. She remained silent as the investigation took a dark turn. The forensic analysis would soon change the entire investigation. Toxicology results revealed a massive concentration of sedatives in his system. A routine allergy medication had become a central piece of evidence. Blood tests showed 7,100 nanograms of the drug. This concentration was 7 times the maximum therapeutic limit allowed. A lethal dose was discovered alongside evidence hidden in her purse. Sugary juice had likely been used to mask the chemical bitterness. The autopsy proved the victim died before touching the water. He was poisoned on deck, then discarded by his longtime wife. The detective begins by revisiting the morning the pair arrived at the boat ramp. He presses for a timeline of the journey, noting their reported 5 a.m. departure. Lori remains unyielding, stating she has no intention of revising her earlier claims. The investigator acknowledges her refusal. He pivots to the digital evidence recovered from her private mobile phone records. Her social media history paints a narrative that contradicts her current version of events. He pauses, preparing to pose a more pointed and calculated question. The inquiry shifts toward her suspicious computer activity during the Florida excursion. Forensic logs reveal her researching water depth charts and nocturnal visibility on the ocean. The sheer volume of this incriminating data is becoming impossible to ignore. He demands a justification for these specific searches, watching her reaction closely. Feeling the pressure, Lori hints that she might require legal counsel before continuing. The detective agrees, stating that these answers are vital to concluding the case. He inquires if she has already secured a defense attorney for these proceedings. At this current stage, he waits for her response. The bottom line is that the authorities require the truth about the final outcome. He offers her one last chance to clarify the facts before the file reaches prosecutors. Lori claims total ignorance, dismissing the allegations as groundless rumors or confusion. She denies any knowledge of the findings, questioning where such information originated. The investigator reminds her that her lack of clarity is exactly why they are talking. He admits that her conflicting stories have led to a total breakdown in trust. She maintains the reports are false, claiming a hollow desire for total transparency. She references media coverage, suggesting the narrative has been poisoned by the local press. Lori blames anonymous sources for the confusion, sticking to her plea of total bewilderment. The detective decides to stop questioning and instead present the full scope of their findings. This ensures she is fully aware of the mountain of evidence stacked against her. Records show a pattern of suspicious activity within the organization prior to the 24th. On the 24th, she was notified of her suspension and surprisingly offered her cooperation. By the 25th, the board terminated her, serving the formal notice on the 26th. Investigators noted a brief, targeted phone contact made on that same day. A short, strange call was logged, where she insisted on being the one to deliver the news. The timeline grows more focused. Evidence shows she was booking flights to Florida between the 25th and 26th. She claimed the trip was a long-standing plan, using it as an excuse to avoid meetings. However, her private correspondence suggests otherwise. Emails sent to her daughter revealed the Florida trip as a sudden, unexpected development. By the 26th, she told associates their plans had abruptly shifted toward the south. Though they left on the 28th, her search history on the 27th grew dark. Focused on, she was caught researching articles about drownings along the Florida Gold Coast. Her history was flooded with reports of canal deaths and fatal boating accidents. She departed for the south on the 28th, immediately following this research. Within the first 48 hours of her arrival, her digital footprint exploded with activity. She was obsessively searching for boat rentals, deep water locations, and local fishing spots. Investigators analyzed the lake's topography, focusing on water depth and its distance from the shoreline. Upon the couple's return from the first trip, detectives noted a glaring lack of suspicious activity. There were virtually zero digital searches regarding anything incriminating during that initial period. When they finally returned on the 8th or 9th, the narrative began to shift significantly. Lori told Jessica and several others that Larry was suffering from a debilitating flu bug. However, Larry's own medical records and neighbor accounts told a very different story about the trip. While he mentioned a minor illness to his doctor, no other evidence suggested he was truly sick. Detectives remained wary of neighborly observations, knowing how easily a witness's perspective can be skewed. One neighbor insisted that Larry showed absolutely no signs of physical distress or failing health. She maintained that Larry would have sought her advice immediately if he felt genuinely unwell. By the 11th, the search history took a dark turn toward the lethality of the flu. Authorities then tracked searches for water depth and the specific geography of Lake Pendorale. The investigation focused on nighttime lake access and the hazardous terrain surrounding Whiskey Rock. As the deepest point in the lake, it became a location of interest after phone pings. Data placed the device in Bayview during the early hours of the 12th for several hours. To understand the motive, investigators dissected the timeline leading up to the fateful boat trip. Lori was fired for embezzlement on January 26, 2018, just before fleeing to Florida. During that trip, she conducted several incriminating searches about drowning deaths along the Florida coast. It was during this vacation that Lori supposedly fell victim to a sudden, violent illness. Detectives suspect this was a failed murder attempt caused by an insufficient dose of medication. Once back in Idaho, Lori changed tactics. Even though the boat ride was originally Larry's idea, he wanted to surprise her with a sunrise cruise. She saw it as his final morning. On the morning of the 13th, the couple was spotted arriving at the boat launch. Cell tower data confirmed their phone was near Micah Bay around 6 or 6:30 a.m. This digital footprint established their presence at the scene during the critical pre-dawn hours. A photo and text at 6:40 a.m. placed them at the ramp just before departure. A brief, 1-second audio clip of a male voice suggested Larry was still alive then. Between 6:40 and 10 a.m., a tragic event occurred, resulting in Larry entering the water. The autopsy provided no evidence of a stroke or any other natural medical emergency. For the technical details of the cause of death, investigators deferred to the medical examiner. The findings showed a lethal concentration of diphenhydramine, a sedative found in common allergy medications. The evidence began to assemble a clear and disturbing picture of the final hours. Larry was alive at 6:40 a.m., but his life ended shortly after that final communication. By 10:23 a.m., when the emergency call was made, Larry was already deceased. Toxicologists confirmed that his system contained lethal levels of the sedative during that time frame. Lori later admitted to using the sedative herself, knowing exactly how it affected the human body. She noted that even 2 pills would typically cause a deep, unresponsive state of sleep. Dr. King, the coroner, estimated that a massive amount of the drug was used. The dosage was high enough to ensure Larry remained incapacitated while on the water. The timeline suggests the poisoning was executed with cold, calculated precision. If he fell overboard after 6:40, the sedative would have been ingested shortly before. This narrow window between 6:40 and 9 a.m. is when the crime occurred. During those silent hours, the massive dose of medication began to overwhelm his system. Larry would have had to consume a significant quantity of the sedative in that period. As Lori knew from experience, the drug acts quickly to strip a person of consciousness. The investigator noted that a double dose of his own antihistamines would leave him virtually incapacitated within 30 minutes. He admitted her complex psychological profile remained an enigma. Medical consultations suggested the sedative's rapid onset would leave a victim in a state of near paralysis and mental fog. These were the uncompromising facts she now had to reconcile with her version of reality. It became increasingly clear to authorities that Lori was the primary architect behind Larry's mysterious death. He offered her a final chance to provide a narrative that didn't end in her immediate prosecution. Evidence supported these conclusions. They mapped out a damning timeline by extracting data from her mobile device, social accounts, and private emails. Corroborating messages from her inner circle helped piece together a chronology that pointed toward a singular conclusion. He sought to peel back the layers of their marriage, looking for the rot beneath the surface. Every witness interviewed described their union as an idyllic, flawless couple. He questioned if she possessed the capacity to lethally harm her husband. The consensus was almost universal. Nearly no one believed she was capable of such a calculated act. He filtered out biased opinions, searching for the objective truth hidden within their testimonies. One specific testimony intrigued him. This person doubted her malice, but suggested a chilling motive if she were guilty. They speculated that if Lori had acted, it might have been a twisted form of a mercy killing. The theory posited that she chose to end his life, rather than allow him to witness her inevitable social disgrace. Publicly, the couple appeared to navigate life with an enviable level of mutual support. Behind closed doors, however, severe financial strain began to erode the foundation of their partnership. Investigation revealed Lori had been covertly funneling their shared assets to her children from a previous marriage. This spending crippled them financially, quite apart from her hidden embezzlement. Larry was oblivious that his wife had stolen $500,000 from her firm. Detectives believe she murdered Larry to keep her deception hidden and perhaps to secure a lighter sentence through grief. She aimed to manipulate the court's sympathy, using her widowhood to mitigate her fraud charges. He summarized the evidence, noting that the comprehensive timeline of her movements was nearly complete. He suggested reviewing these findings with her attorney. Without her input, the prosecution would rely solely on this digital trail as the definitive account of the crime. The case file was prepared for submission, containing every incriminating detail they had uncovered thus far. The evidence indicated that Lori sought a permanent solution to prevent Larry from discovering her extensive financial fraud. Essentially, he chose his words carefully, reflecting on the disturbing discrepancy between their public life and her private actions. Their relationship was described as so flawless that it became a standard of comparison for those around them. Observers noted a nauseating level of affection, though a subtle shift in their dynamic emerged in the final months. Witness accounts noted shifts, though such friction is common. He concluded his grim summary of the active investigation. He ended the session, acknowledging her right to consult with an attorney before answering further questions. He remained open to clarifying any specific technicalities regarding the sequence of events he had just outlined. Any questions on the timeline? She had none, prompting a discussion on meeting with her legal team. He reminded her that all statements must be recorded. She nodded. Lori received 5 years for embezzlement before being officially indicted for her husband's murder. In 2021, she confessed to second-degree murder, claiming she intended the poisoned drink for herself. The court dismissed her suicide claim. In May of 2021, she received a life sentence with 30-year parole. A heavy silence remains for those Larry left behind, his kin mourning a gentle soul stolen by fate long before his time had truly come. The briefing ends. Appreciation is felt for every observer, whether they are dedicated followers or just beginning this grim journey. Revisit a chillingly deviant file at this location, or review the latest findings from the most recent inquiry. Positioned here, behind every perfect life, there is a truth that cannot be buried. The tragedy of Lori Eisenberg isn't just a chilling true crime case. It is a profound warning about the corrosive power of the masks we wear and the high price of a hollow reputation. We often believe we can outrun our shadows. Lori Eisenberg thought she could erase a $500,000 web of lies with a single, calculated act of betrayal. She traded a lifetime of devotion for a desperate attempt to stay hidden, poisoning the very man who promised to love her until death. But the truth, much like the dark, frigid depths of an Idaho lake, does not keep secrets forever. It eventually rises, cold and uncompromising. This story serves as a haunting lesson. Greed is a slow-acting poison. It kills the conscience long before it destroys a life. Integrity isn't what we display under the spotlight. It is what we do in the silent, pre-dawn hours when we think no one is watching. Let this be a reminder that no amount of stolen wealth is worth the price of a human soul. Build your life on the bedrock of honesty. A house of cards, no matter how beautiful, will always come crashing down when the wind of truth finally blows.